January 17, 1944. A biting wind howls across the East Anglian airfield, its icy fingers clawing at the canvas tents, where American pilots huddle over steaming mugs of coffee. The pre-dawn sky is a bruised purple, heavy with the promise of snow, and the distant rumble of Merlin engines stirs the silence, a low growl that pulses like a heartbeat. P-51 Mustangs, sleek and silver, gleam under the faint light of hooded lanterns, their wings cutting sharp silhouettes against the horizon. At RAF Leiston, the 357th Fighter Group prepares for another sortie over the Reich. The air is thick with the scent of aviation fuel and the sharp tang of metal, a sensory prelude to the chaos awaiting them above the clouds. For the German pilots of the Luftwaffe, stationed hundreds of miles away in northern France, this day will unravel their confidence, shredding it as swiftly as the Mustang's 150 caliber guns will tear through their Messerschmitts. This is no ordinary mission. It is a turning point, a moment when the skies over Europe become a crucible for courage, technology, and the unrelenting tide of history. The winter of 1944 marked a pivotal shift in the air war over Europe. By this time, the Allied bombing campaign had intensified, with American B-17 flying fortresses and B-24 Liberators pounding German industrial centers by day, while the British RAF struck under cover of night. The Luftwaffe, once the unchallenged master of the skies, was stretched to its breaking point. Germany's airfields were littered with the wreckage of their own ambition, factories struggling to replace lost aircraft, fuel reserves dwindling, and experienced pilots becoming an ever-scarcer commodity. The Messerschmitt Bf-109, a formidable fighter in the early years of the war, and the newer Focke-Wulf FW-190 were still lethal in skilled hands. But the Luftwaffe's training programs had withered. Novice pilots, some with fewer than 50 hours of flight time, were thrust into combat against seasoned Allied airmen. The introduction of the P-51 Mustang, however, was a thunderbolt. With its Rolls-Royce Merlin engine, long-range fuel tanks, and unmatched speed, the Mustang could escort bombers deep into Germany and engage enemy fighters on equal, if not superior, terms. On January 17, 1944, as the 357th Fighter Group took to the skies, the Luftwaffe was about to confront a machine that would redefine aerial warfare. German pilots, climbing into their cockpits that morning, carried a mixture of pride and dread. They expected to meet the familiar foes, Spitfires, perhaps, or the slower P-47 Thunderbolts, which they could outmaneuver in a dogfight. The Messerschmitt Bf-109 G6, with its powerful Daimler-Benz engine, was a respected adversary, and Luftwaffe pilots clung to the belief that their skill and experience would prevail. Many had been raised on tales of the invincibility of the Third Reich, their confidence bolstered by early victories in Poland, France, and the Low Countries. Yet, as they climbed to meet the American bomber formations, they were unprepared for the silver streaks that dove from the contrails above. The Mustangs were not just escorts. They were hunters. German pilots, peering through their canopies, saw their formations disintegrate under a hail of 50 caliber rounds, the Mustang's 6 machine guns roaring with a precision that left no room for error. Oberleutnant Hans Müller, a veteran of the Eastern Front, later wrote in a captured diary, "We thought we knew the Americans. Big planes, big bombs, but no finesse. Then came the Mustangs, and the sky became a slaughterhouse." The Luftwaffe's expectation of dominance was shattered, replaced by the stark reality of vulnerability. The historical record underscores the devastation wrought by the Mustangs. On January 17, 1944, the 357th Fighter Group, part of the 8th Air Force, engaged Luftwaffe fighters over northern Germany. Official reports from the U.S. Army Air Forces note that the group claimed 12 enemy aircraft destroyed in a single mission, with no losses of their own. The Mustang's performance was staggering. It could reach speeds of 440 miles per hour, outpacing the Bf-109's 400 miles per hour at high altitude, and its range of over 1,600 miles with drop tanks allowed it to pursue German fighters far beyond their bases. Luftwaffe records from the same period reveal a grim toll. Jagdgeschwader 26, a seasoned German fighter wing, reported losses of 8 Bf-109s and 3 FW-190s in a single day, with pilots describing the Mustangs as ghosts that struck and vanished. General Adolf Galland, the Luftwaffe's chief of fighters, later remarked in his memoir, "The Mustang was a shock. It was not just a plane, it was a symbol of American industrial might, a machine that could reach us anywhere." The numbers tell a stark story. By early 1944, the Luftwaffe was losing an average of 50 fighters per week, a rate unsustainable for an already depleted force. The sound of the Mustang's Merlin engine became a recurring motif in the skies, a low, throaty roar that German pilots learned to dread. It was more than a mechanical noise. It was the sound of American abundance, a testament to a nation's capacity to produce machines of unmatched quality in staggering quantities. While German factories struggled under Allied bombs, American assembly lines churned out Mustangs at a rate of nearly 1,000 per month by mid-1944. The Merlin engine, license-built by Packard in the United States, was a marvel of engineering, its 12 cylinders humming with a power that seemed to embody the boundless energy of a nation untouched by the devastation of war on its own soil. For the Luftwaffe pilot, that sound was a harbinger of doom, a reminder that the enemy they faced was not just skilled, but resourced beyond their comprehension. It echoed in their ears as they scanned the skies, knowing that the next burst of gunfire could come from a Mustang diving from the sun. The encounters of January 1944 transformed the Luftwaffe's perception of the air war. Where once they had viewed the Americans as industrial giants with little tactical finesse, they now faced an enemy that combined technological superiority with aggressive skill. The Mustangs did not merely protect bombers. They sought out and destroyed German fighters, turning defensive escorts into offensive predators. This shift forced a re-evaluation of strategy. Luftwaffe commanders, once confident in their ability to bleed the Allied air forces through attrition, now faced the prospect of annihilation. Pilots who survived the Mustang's onslaught returned to their bases with a new respect for their adversary, and a growing fear that the war in the air was slipping from their grasp. The psychological toll was profound. A captured German pilot, Unteroffizier Karl Becker, recounted in an interrogation, "After the Mustangs, we stopped believing we could win. It was not just the planes. It was what they represented. A nation that could afford to fight forever." The ideology of Nazi invincibility, carefully cultivated through years of propaganda, began to crack under the weight of American industrial might and determination. The Mustang's roar was more than a sound. It was a symbol of democracy's resilience. In the hands of American pilots, it represented a nation that could mobilize its resources and ideals to confront tyranny. The United States, far from the battlefields of Europe, poured its wealth into machines like the Mustang, each one a testament to a society that valued innovation and freedom. The German pilot, strapped into his Messerschmitt, faced not just a superior aircraft, but the embodiment of a system that could outproduce and outlast his own. The Merlin's hum was the sound of factories working around the clock, of a people united in purpose, of a democracy that could harness its abundance to defend its principles. It was a stark contrast to the Reich's faltering war machine, where shortages of fuel, parts, and hope were becoming the norm. The Mustang, in its sleek design and relentless power, carried the weight of an idea that freedom, backed by resolve, could triumph over oppression. As the war progressed, the Mustang's impact only grew. By the time of the Normandy invasion in June 1944, P-51s dominated the skies, providing air cover for Allied troops and decimating German attempts to reinforce their positions. Luftwaffe losses mounted, with over 2,000 fighters destroyed in the first 6 months of 1944 alone. The Mustangs' role in achieving air superiority was undeniable, paving the way for the success of D-Day and the eventual collapse of the Third Reich. Yet, beyond the statistics, the Mustang left a deeper mark. It reshaped the narrative of the air war, proving that technology, when wielded by a nation committed to liberty, could alter the course of history. The German pilots who survived those encounters carried with them a new understanding. The war was no longer theirs to win.